Well, welcome to TKT Visionaries, our monthly show where we bring industry leaders together to talk about the leading trends affecting our industry. This month, I've got wonderful guests. They happen to not only be industry experts, but also some dear friends as well. So first, we have Morgan Prygrocki. Get her name right. I actually asked her husband when I was at the Red event. So I got that. She's the Senior Strategic Development Manager at Adobe, and I've known Morgan for many, many years. She's actually the reason that I shoot Red, as a matter of fact. And then Jeff Greenberg, owner of Greenberg Consulting. He's a post-consulting strategic advisor, editor, colorist, author, educator, all-around good guy. We had some events at NAB where I first got to actually meet Jeff. Thank you for being here. And we have Michael Kammes is also...
I have that effect on people. The 5 gig is not working.
Totally like technology to give us joy. I think it's the future AI coming back to kill all of us, right?
This is the tool that we want, or is it more that you guys are developing things and releasing them and getting feedback as to what people are?
If somebody's on WhatsApp with them, can you tell them that he's cutting out?
Now I'm back. Perfect. That's the wonders of the new internet. So we'll go back to the question to Morgan. So what, in this, the wild and wacky world of AI, are you seeing customers come to you going, these are the tools we want, and you guys are developing them? Or is it more like a giant experiment where you guys are learning about what can be done and providing those to customers and seeing what they use?
I think it's actually a little bit of a mixture of both. I think the general feedback that we're hearing from a lot of our user base is really just around how can my creatives work more efficiently, and how can we take out some of the less creative parts of the process, things like versioning and, some of the more repetitive, redundant tasks that go into, whether that's pre-production, post-production, even physical production, and how can we streamline this in a way that doesn't take up as much time? So I think based on the feedback that we're hearing from our users, we're looking at opportunities to help take out some of those finer elements of the process. Maybe it's, something like resizing a video for delivery to TikTok and Instagram. But we also have a lot of really, really talented engineers who love to tinker. And, we're in a fortunate position to where, some of our research teams are really given a long leash to figure out, what areas of innovation can exist within this space. So I think it's a healthy mixture of both. But ultimately, nothing really makes it to product without really going through the paces of getting user feedback. We love to test out new concepts in beta. So little known fact, all of our Creative Cloud apps also have the ability of downloading a beta in parallel to the release build of any application. And that's really the sandbox for where a lot of these new features are going to first emerge.
Oh, fantastic. And Jeff, what are you seeing in your customers and the clients you work with? Are they chomping at the bit to say, I need this in AI, or is it more of a wait and see, or is it, holy crap, this is scaring the heck out of me?
It's all of the above. I mean, in each piece of that gamut, they're each finding through a very painful discovery process of a new tool that shows up on their frontier. I got to credit Morgan. I got to credit, the beta of the new Photoshop and the Firefly integration. I have to tell you, it is spectacular. And the people, I already know people who are losing their minds, Philip, because in Photoshop, and I'm talking about video people, they're instantly extending edges, fixing things faster, and really getting their job done faster. And there's absolutely a fear process as well, because they're scared of something coming along in like Canva or the like, and suddenly cutting out a lot of the work that in a lot of cases they didn't really enjoy to begin with, which is kind of always strange to me. I always think of it as an assistant, and that's what we really kind of focus on. Is it's more of an artificial assistant than it is a replacement.
Yeah,
100%. If you also, if you think about it, like we're not in the business of replacing creatives. That would actually be counterintuitive to what we are trying to build here. But exactly to your point, we're really just trying to create a creative assistant that allows you to arrive at final concept faster.
Okay. So, Michael, I obviously was going to give you credit, and you told me there was somebody else who said this, but there was a great statement that was AI is not going to replace you, but somebody using AI is going to replace you. In the work and the customers and the things that you're doing, are you finding people gravitating to using AI to help them do things to get ahead? Or are you seeing people worried about, I'm going to lose my job because of AI?
What's very interesting is that the voices of the folks who are concerned about it taking their job tend to be a little bit louder than the 100 times the amount of people who are actually using these tools. I think folks using technology as it comes out has always catapulted folks to the head of the line. So this isn't anything different than that. However, I can't remember any other point in time where I've seen simultaneously every facet of the creative industry all biting their nails. We have voiceover artists concerned that voice cloning is going to take their jobs. That the things like Autopod that are automatically doing edits are going to take the editors' jobs, and generative AI is going to take the job of the people who are doing artwork. So it's really interesting to see the large swath or wide swath of folks who are concerned, but at the same time, everyone's asking for it. At NAB this year, the single biggest question was, are you doing anything AI? That was the single biggest question at our booth this year.
Yeah, it's actually interesting you brought up about people worried about losing jobs. And Jeff and I had this conversation and wanted to get your thoughts, Michael. So one of the things about our industry is that a lot of it is sort of, whether it's official apprenticeship, it's a type of apprenticeship. You're an assistant editor before you become an editor. I
think Philip's going to need that new router sooner than later.
But Michael, it's going to have AI assist. So it will be able to synthesize his voice when it doesn't work.
It's going to automatically switch to dial-up when it goes down so we can keep talking.
Ham radio, yes, my friend.
Exactly.
We lost you there, Philip.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's wonderful. The 5 gig internet, it's not as stable as it should be. So anyhow, the question was really around this concept of, you've got, you become an editor by being an assistant editor first, and you learn by sitting at the feet of the editor and learning what's a good shot. And your job is sort of the scut work. It's to go and to call the shots. Well, if AI is replacing that assistant editor's role, how do you become an editor? Or is that a concern in the industry that we're losing this apprenticeship type, whether it's official or unofficial, in getting into those more advanced roles?
I wouldn't say that we are in the process of phasing out assistant editors. I think if anything, it's going to help the assistant editor get to where they need to be faster. And I think there's a big difference between a creative assistant and which is what we lovingly now refer to a lot of the AI tools, and a first AE. There's still a pretty large delta there. And I think we would be in deep trouble if we're all of a sudden trying to cut out first assistant editors out of this process.
I'm going to go with a wider swath of the market. It depends where we are in the market. When I think of LA, the real craft editors, and the real craft editors, they're always going to have assistants. They're always going to need assistants. They want to do storytelling and storytelling first. And the people coming in, they need to be technical to support that storytelling. But when I look outside of it, when I look at maybe sort of more of the corporate America, everybody has to do everything. And in doing everything, if I can take the stuff that I don't like, the repetitive task stuff, and I can give it to a combination of ChatGPT and other pieces to get the work done so I can do the fun parts of the work, it gets to the fun faster. That's kind of how I look at all of it.
Jeff, I gotta agree with you. I as much as I love the industry we work in, the deifying of editors and assistant editors being top of the food chain has been dropping like a rock over the past 20 years. Since the days we've gone from mag to digital, the days of mentoring and coaching have dropped systematically throughout the post industry. And now, learning about editing and saying, I want to work in movies isn't the end all be all. It's, I want to work for Mr. Beast. I want to work for this YouTuber. I want to work for this influencer, where the roles of an editor, traditional editor, motion graphics, VFX are all blended and blurred. And I now no longer think that becoming a post-production professional in the TV and film industry is as important as it once was. So the mentorship, I think, is going to continue to drop precipitously.
But when you see that lack of mentorship, do you find that maybe the skill sets of the people now, granted, there's a lot more places that they can go and do their job, like to your point, being that editor on a major motion picture isn't necessarily the end all, the be all, but the skills that are required to be an editor, to work for a Mr. Beast or for Linus Tech or whatever, there's still skills that have to be learned. Are we losing that because of these tools, or are people gaining more from the tools in those types of roles?
Mr. Kammes, you want that one? Or you want
I didn't want to step on anyone's toes. The base tools are still needed. You still need to know how to do multicam. You still need to know how to tell a story, but to be segmented. And again, that's kind of how it is in the film and TV industry here in the States, is you are segmented and you are in that role. That is the one thing you do. And then you communicate between who's in front of you and who's behind you. Yep. That's kind of how it is. And I don't think folks like being pigeonholed like that any longer, and that's why some of these other jobs are much more appealing. Plus the fact you don't have to be geo-locked like you are for some of the higher end stuff in film and television in LA and New York.
But Philip, I'll turn to you. I'll turn to you and say that mentorship as a whole is eroded continuously in all the creative fields.
Yeah,
and it's painful to watch, because I think that there is a certain lack of feedback loop for a creative that gets lost that way. There is a lack of somebody going, oh yeah, I made that mistake. You need to go out and make bigger mistakes, and that ripple in the pond. We get these wonderful, amazing digital tools that give us a lot of power. And yeah, you know how the buttons and switches work, but you still don't have the 10,000 hours of craft necessarily.
Right. So Morgan, I'll ask you this question. So there's that, to Jeff's point, you always say you learn from other people's mistakes because you can't live long enough to make them all yourself. Are you finding that I don't know whether call it a learning curve, but with the AI tools, are we finding people accelerating faster or just repeating things that are already existing?
No, I would say learning things faster. Well, and I can speak to this from the Adobe perspective, but because the way a lot of our AI tools work, almost give you a little bit of a trail of breadcrumbs in, whichever workspace you're in, to see exactly what the AI did to your image or your audio track. It's actually accelerating new users to learn our platform faster, because you say, like let's take, for instance, something like auto color. It's using AI to get a first pass of color down on whatever video track you're working with. As a new user, you might not know, the right combination of exposure changes relative to tint, relative to warmth. Being able to see exactly what the AI did to your image to get the result you're seeing in front of you is actually in itself sort of an assist in figuring out how to use a lot of these tools in a practical sense. So I'd say it's shortening. It's definitely shortening the learning curve. And I know that when I was learning, digital editing way back when on Final Cut 5-ish, I can't even remember when at this point. The only option for really like teaching yourself anything is like buying a book and going through different modules and chapters. But for a lot of creatives who probably learn better with getting, hands-on with the tools, I think AI tools, teaching you by showing you visually what's going on is kind of an interesting concept of learning something new. And today, I mean, I'll even admit myself, I learn better rather watching YouTube videos rather than trying to dig through documentation. Maybe that's just everybody learns.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I definitely, I'll go down our YouTube rabbit hole and really dissect things because I'm a visual learner, although I read lots of tech manuals as well. So I think there is that value. I always say it's sort of like when the synthesizer came out, that it enabled somebody who, couldn't afford to get a 100-piece orchestra to write a symphony and try it out because they have the skills to do it. And then they are noticed, and then they're able to get to a point in their career where they can hire that 100-piece orchestra and do the music, which is fantastic. But then there's that person who should never attempt to, orchestrate a 100-piece orchestra. Do we see, and I'll address this to Michael, do you see AI adding a lot, for lack of a term, static into the industry, where you're getting a lot more content, but maybe not the greatest content because it sort of becomes a crutch for those who may not have the skill set? It's great for those who have the skill set, but what about those who don't have the skill set? Are we seeing that it becomes a crutch?
It's a good question. Almost the same thing would be said for 20 years ago when Pro Tools introduced a free version, right? Pro Tools 3.0. I almost said Final Cut Pro 3.04. 3.4, I believe. And Pro Tools went free. And that was the same concern in the industry. Will this help usher in an era of subpar music and sound, post-production, because it's been democratized and everyone could use it? Right. And I would venture a guess to say, no, it got more people to try it and decide if that's what they want to do for a living and make better content. I think the flip side to this is you talk about people being able to use AI to make more content. There's going to be more content generated than we can even consume. And thus we'll have to use AI to curate all of the content created by AI for us to enjoy. And so it just becomes this, this huge deluge of content which goes above the clouds, and then we never see it because AI filters it, and then we just get some of the stuff coming back down. And I just find that to be totally hysterical. The fact that there will be this content that a good part of us will never consume because it's generated or being filtered by AI.
Yeah. Jeff, in those terms, are you coming across people who are concerned AI is going to kill us? I mean, that's the doom and gloom scenario, that we have to put the brakes on it and this is going to be the end of the world? Or is it more a lot of hype, and that the rationalization is that it's not going to kill us, but it's actually going to become this sort of formative, for the gilded age of creatives, where you're going to be able to do a lot more?
Wow. I have a lot of thoughts here. Let's deal with the most serious one, which is, I don't think, if it hasn't happened already, I think it already has happened. An F-16 was piloted completely by an AI.
Yeah.
And when you combine that with some of the really amazingly frightening drones out there, you asked the scary question, Philip. Do I think it'd be easy to say, go kill all the people over there using your great AI technology? I think we could do it before the AI technology. Yeah. I just think it'll take less human beings to be able to press an off button. Right. Do I think Sam of OpenAI walks around with somebody who's got a backpack with an off switch just in case? I don't know. I hope so. So yeah, I think there is absolute validity to, if you give it the controls for the switch, we might not on day one. We might just ask it for advice. And then we might just go, oh, handle the lights. Handle the lights and the plumbing, but don't handle the critical care at the emergency. You're better at driving than we are. Do that too. Yeah. As far as the Gilded Age, I recently read a really phenomenal discussion around the television show The Orville, which has a lot of Star Trek items, where they basically said, we can't interfere with your civilization. We can't give you these replicators, these free food and generators, because you're not evolved enough as a society. Otherwise, people will hoard it and destroy society. I think that there's both sides of AI here. It could become phenomenal if we believe human beings should work less.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was listening to a podcast the other day and discussing, and then of course we use the term AI a lot, and it's really, as I've mentioned to you in the past, Jeff, I really called algorithmic imitation. It's an algorithm. We've just learned new ways of doing algorithms, and there's this that not supposedly they did at I don't know, it was Caltech, discovered potential antibiotics that will assist against bacteria that's antibiotic resistant. And when I was listening to what they were saying, it's like, oh, we used AI. But what they really did is sort of wrote new algorithms using these new techniques that we're learning to sort through all of this data. Morgan, in what you guys are doing, in the research that Adobe's doing, are you seeing this as more and more research driving these tools out? There's a lot more technology we've got to figure out yet in what you guys are developing?
Yeah, I think everything. Actually, I was at an AI event 2 weeks ago, and one of the panelists, I think, put it perfectly. What used to represent maybe a year's worth of research is now equivalent to a day's worth of research in the light speed at which we are moving right now with AI technology. Adobe is a very large company with tens of thousands of employees, and oftentimes it's really challenging for us to even innovate at a pace at which our creatives are demanding certain features or technology. The speed at which I've even seen us move towards developing more AI tech is enough to give me whiplash at the moment. So I think part of it is demand, and every day I feel like we're listening to a new podcast or a new news story that's talking about a totally uncovered new opportunity for AI to come in and have a cure for cancer, or figure out a way. I just listened to another podcast last week that says AI is going to wipe out travel agents, because you can now type in, this is my budget for my vacation, here's where I want to go, here's the type of things I want to do, and bam, your entire itinerary is now generated. So I think we haven't even begun to scratch the surface with the number of use cases that we're looking at from a creative perspective. I think that this is going to dramatically change how we, the types of content that we consume. And specifically, what I'm talking about are things like big budget movies. A lot of big budget movies have a lot of budget to invest in things like previs and pitch viz, even, which is basically, for those of you that aren't familiar, just generating animatics of or storyboard concepts to help get your project made. And I think today, one of the things that I've witnessed is that there definitely is a glass ceiling with the types of creatives that can actually get their movies made. It's all about who you know in Hollywood. And, if you don't have funding behind you to get these fancy previs and pitch viz sequences generated, it can be really hard to get your idea even looked at by someone that has the ability of funding your project. So I think, if we're able to put more of these tools in the hands of creatives that have good ideas and now have the means to at least get their ideas on a screen, I think that's going to dramatically change what projects get funded. And I'm not saying I don't want to watch a million more Marvel movies, but I'm saying that maybe we'll come up with some new franchises from some different voices that we haven't heard of before. And same thing goes with international content too. If you look at some of the stuff that NVIDIA is working on, man, dubbing is going to be, a thing of the past. Pretty soon, we're going to be able to reconstruct people's mouths, so you won't even know what country the content.
I miss those Godzilla films from when I was a little kid. That was the thing. That's what you want to see them. Michael, so obviously the technology is created by humans. So we know with general pre-trained, the GPT stuff, it's trained on millions of words and variables. And then a human being has to sort of come back in and sort of go, oh, no, that's not what this means. And no, isn't what this means. So there's always some type of inherent bias that gets placed into these models. In the work that you've done and the things that you've seen, have you seen that being, I don't want to say an issue, but it's come up? I know, like the original Mid-Journey, everything was shallow depth of field. I mean, it looked like they were all trained on the same type of photograph. Do you see that as being an issue that we've got to sort of break out, or is it just a natural evolution? What are your sort of thoughts on that human influence on this?
It feels like there's a gold rush right now, and everyone's heading to the place where you mine gold, and they're pouring whatever chemicals they want into the ground and digging to get that gold. And what I'm trying to get at is there's models that have been built for LLM, the large language models that OpenAI and ChatGPT are using. And there's also models that have been created by using scraped work, right? Work from different websites, different domains. And a lot of it has been cleansed. And when it becomes cleansed, that's automatically going to limit I don't want to use the word creativity, but the amount of diversity that you're going to see in that creation, because those are cleaned data sets or clean models. Mm-hmm. And that's certainly part of the issue right now, is that most of the commercially available models have been cleansed. And then we look into the LLMs, the large language models. When you want to write about something or have AI assist you in writing about something, those models have been cleansed. And a lot of the content that's being generated right now, that is kind of an afterthought, because folks want to make that money. They want to make that, here I have a web service that I can do X, Y, and Z for $20 a month. I need to sell that. That needs to be ratified. That needs to be examined. And that's going to take us into the area where we start getting privatized data sets, privatized models where they're dirty, as they say. They're models that haven't gone through a curation process and can be used in their natural state, which obviously can have positive and negative ramifications. Mm-hmm. But I think that's one of the next steps we have to take, are getting access to models that haven't been cleansed.
Yes. Jeff, speaking of the cleansed models and the fact that we're scraping stuff, what are your customers' thoughts or ideas, or things they're talking about when it comes to the legal aspects of this? There's this whole concept that I think that the Library of Congress says that it will not copyright anything that's AI generated. Is there a concern within the creative realm that we're going to lose the ability to own our stuff because computers are generating all this content?
So are we going to lose our ability to generate our stuff, to own our stuff? I don't think so. I think Disney will prevent that from ever being a factor. and there's kind of a hypocrisy here of, I want to be able to own my AI generated material, but my AI material was trained on other people's copyrighted based information. Interestingly, today, out of Japan, they said, oh, no, if it's out there, web scraping is not copyright for training. And I think we're going to have the standard problem we have with technology, which is our political spectrum, wherever it is about 6 months to 6 years behind or more behind technology. And that's going to be a major problems around AI. Whether it's what Michael was talking about, where is the training coming from, and is it washed? Because both Meta and Microsoft, and who knows, however many other groups, have created chatbots that are racist and all sorts of awful things from unfiltered, unclean material just out there. It's going to be an interesting problem. I wish we had a lawyer on this one.
That would be definitely interesting. I know there was a conversation where they're training models, and an individual said, "Oh, I'm going to use ChatGPT to say I've got $100 I want to invest." And the first thing that popped into my mind was, you've just trained this model on the internet, which is filled with thousands of get-rich-quick schemes, and it can't discern what is real and what is fake. So it's really going to be interesting on what the results are. Now, Morgan, I think Adobe took an interesting tact in that I believe you train the models only on material that was within the Adobe domain. So things that people had already provided to you in the stock area as part of Adobe. How has the we'll look into it. So the industry and your customers' reaction to that fact. Has it been a positive one? Has it been, it doesn't really matter, or it's lacking? How has that been sort of received?
It's been super positive. In fact, in all of my discussions, I haven't received a single negative piece of feedback from users. I think we're all anxiously awaiting, what conversations are going to happen within our government that are either going to prevent or at least, pretty widely restrict, how some of this AI generated content is being used. And the approach that we've taken is, granted, we have one of the largest stock libraries in the world, so we have that going for us. But we've trained our AI models on hundreds of millions of high quality stock assets that we have license to use. And we also have planted a flag in the statement that we intend to compensate the creators for as these new images are being created. We want to make sure that if it's pulling from some of our users' content, we want to figure out a way to track or compensate that. So I think, that's going to be an evolving discussion that we're going to have over time. But I think one of the biggest areas of opportunity that a lot of our larger enterprise clients, especially those in M&E, are looking at are opportunities to be able to train their own models on their own library of content. So you'll notice if you try to type in anything to the Firefly beta or anything using generative fill in the Photoshop beta, if you type in something like, show me ancient Egypt in the theme of Star Wars, you're going to get some weird results. It's not going to be the Star Wars imagery that you might otherwise expect within other platforms, and that's intentional by design. But if you're Disney and you're making, the umpteenth prequel to the next, Mandalorian series that's going to come out on Disney Plus, you might want to refine your results based on, some of the work that you've already done. So being able to train your own model to get closer to, those final concept images faster is something that we also want to enable a lot of our M&E customers to have the ability to do. So that is in the cards for us as well. But I think, erring on the side of caution and making sure that we are, ethically sourcing a lot of the source content is top of mind. And we've also even committed to, putting in some measures in place to letting our users know when an image has been altered as well. So when we start to get into deep fake territory, we want to make sure that, our creatives don't have any sort of concerns around, whether or not the footage they're seeing is actually real or not. We're going to put some stopgaps in place to address that.
It's actually, so you bring up the deep fake, Jeff. Have you so obviously, in the legal realm, you always bring in experts into a courtroom who can tell, has this image been altered, and that's sort of the stamp of approval that we can tell. Have you heard of any of these image experts looking at AI generated stuff or AI manipulated stuff, being able to discern that it is a fake? Is it easy enough, or is it really that good now that they're not able to tell?
I'm going to bounce that one over at Morgan, because for the simple reason they're the ones who've got the first line of defense of being able to say, we think this is generated. What's fascinating to me, Philip, is when I look at the large language models, there's a tool out there called Chat Zero. It's creating havoc in the collegiate realm of language, because if you throw the Bible at it, it sits back or the Constitution, it says this is AI generated. I think we have an easier time telling if an image has been manipulated than if an image has been generated from AI. And there's a footnote in that, which is, I've done some work around forensic analysis of imagery. It's a very delicate field where you have to use statements like, I believe based on this, not I know this is faked.
Right. Well, I know I had seen originally early on there was the Chat GPT and people using it to write their college papers. And then I believe OpenAI had a reverse version of that that could tell if it was written by Chat GPT. So professors would know. And then, of course, the arms races begin and somebody develops something that you run your Chat GPT developed content through that to change it enough so that the Chat GPT reversal can't tell that it was reversed. Michael, you're on the West Coast, I believe, and you're closer to ground zero with the writer's strike. And obviously, the first things that we saw in AI were around the chat and the writing. And I saw a great little comic that said, tuna on ipsum lorem, that this writer strike has gone nuts. How is the industry from that writing side seeing this? Are they fearful? Are they seeing it as a tool to help them? A little bit of both?
Well, considering this is surrounding contract renewals through three of the different guilds, I think the easy way would be to put it that they're scared, because that's part of their what they want addressed in the contract renewals, which is you won't utilize AI to replace us. I'm sure there are plenty of folks who have writer's block. I get writer's block quite a bit, and I use it to jumpstart my creative process. But my moral and ethical beliefs say, well, you don't use it for more than kickstarting. I'm not sure everyone would have that same, shall we say, moral fortitude to say, I'm not going to use this. I'm going to use it for this one little use case to get me started, and that's it. And I think rightly, the Writers Guild and the others guilds who are supporting them are in the same vein, that this will probably be used for nefarious purposes, and bad actors will use it just as much as good actors will. So I think there's a healthy amount of skepticism and fear, along with the folks who say this will help me in this narrow creative realm.
Yeah, in fact, I saw an article just the other day of all people, a lawyer used ChatGPT to write his brief, and the judge, it made up cases. And the judge actually went and then looked at those cases and cited that those weren't even real cases. And needless to say, that lawyer got into a lot of trouble. I'd like to bring on Stefan Compel, who was a coworker of mine at Imagine. I think Stefan's on. And are you guys doing much with AI in terms of at Imagine or in the broadcast side? Are you seeing that take off as well?
Currently, we're probably using the same things that we discussed before. So everything where we can use models that help us to translate one language to the other and things like that. I'm not saying it's magic technology. We have this in Teams and Zoom and everywhere. The one thing that surprised me and makes me wonder what are the limits of AI. And the other day, actually, was last week, there was a German, Congress of German engineers, and there was one professor from Munich.
And I apologize, Stefan. You're sort of breaking up there. Was coming in okay. If only we had AI to fix it. So I'm not sure if it's your connection or not.
Yeah, maybe that's because I switched on video. Maybe my connection is as bad as yours. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me, Phil?
Yeah, I can hear you, but unfortunately, it's too garbled. I don't know if you.
I will stop my video. Is it better now?
No, it's unfortunately that's when you have live internet broadcast people. This is what you deal with all the time. But hey, we got a great panel. We appreciate. And I'll have to circle back around with you, Stefan, on some of the things that you're doing there.
Hey, Morgan, can I ask you a question? I believe what the initiative that Adobe has it's the content authenticity initiative. Is that right? The question I had was, how was that implemented? What's the earliest point that gets implemented in the chain to kind of track it? Because if it's being used, if it's something that's part of Photoshop, that's fantastic. But obviously, it's already gone through a couple hands, right? Until it gets there. So where does that content I can't pronounce it, content authenticity initiative? At what point does that enter kind of the media chain?
Are you talking about for tracking, whether or not an image has been altered?
Yeah. Mhm.
That's a great question, and one that would probably be better served by our content authenticity team.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And I'd hate to give you the wrong answer, but I mean that I think this board of trusted individuals that that we've compiled around this concept are still probably trying to navigate that. But let me find out, because I mean that's a fantastic question. I wish I knew the answer to it.
I was going to say, Michael, that actually is a really interesting point of, when things are generated. So let's say I go into Photoshop and I create something from scratch, and it's just made up of an amalgamation of a bunch of stuff. It's obviously I created it. It's, I'm the author. Is there a lot of concern you see in the industry of people passing off work that is AI generated as their own work? And what impacts is that going to have on our industry?
Yeah, I think it's hard because on one hand, AI is a tool, right? And it's a tool to allow you to arrive at whatever concept you have in your mind, and to put that onto a surface of some kind using basic text. So, I mean, it's kind of the chicken and the egg type conversation, which is, the AI is simply calculating what you are typing into the prompt. I mean, who is the real artist? Is it the AI or is it the creative? I would argue that it's the creative, but that's my opinion. I don't know. What do you think, Jeff?
It's like everybody's become a director. As a prompt, you're just telling people what to do. So effectively, everybody's become a director in this world.
I think there's definitely an interesting parallel with sampled music, with where we take samples of music and we create something new, and the question of ownership, and the question of the limited variations there are in our tonal scale. I'm sure we've all heard, there's some great versions of it on YouTube of every song is the same song, and they proceed to go through a progression of very, very similar music using the same set of chords. Is this realistically different? And then, of course, I would argue that some of this in court, at least, was said, well, yeah, it's your own unique creation, but it came enough of somebody else's work that they're going to receive all the money and not you. And I think that's always going to be the dilemma of, we build all of our creativity on the backs of others. Now it's going to be maybe harder to identify because of AI.
Yeah.
So I want to bring up I want to poll the audience here, because I think this was absolutely fascinating. A couple of weeks back, Grimes, who's a music artist who was formerly associated with Elon Musk, for those of you that don't know, she put out a statement saying anybody who wants to use my likeness for AI generated music, that's fine. I'm going to go 50-50 on it with you from any proceeds. And a lot of people in the music industry are really upset about this, because that's almost setting like a precedent for how a lot of AI music could potentially be monetized in the future. What's everybody's thoughts on that? Because I mean, like, maybe Grimes just, witnessed an opportunity to make money. And I'll be honest, I'm listening to some of the AI music that's generated, and it's pretty good. Like, I would still listen to it. And I mean, there is a sort of argument to be made that, all art inspires art. There's tons of musicians that, completely rip off other musicians' work. So what do we think about that? Do we feel like AI generated music is something where some sort of agreement can be reached so everybody's happy, or should we just kill it entirely?
So I'll extend that question a little bit. So if we keep generating on top of music that's already been generated, are we going to create new music? Or are we going to create lots of music that's very, very similar? Because the algorithm starts to narrow. It's sort of like a weather model. It's effectively modeling. You put something into it, you get something out, and you feed it back into the model, and eventually it goes in a certain direction. Do we see, the creativity maybe going away at some point, or winding up narrowing down into a specific thread, because you don't have that human being who is that the Einstein or the Picasso or somebody who thinks completely different and tries something different.
I don't know. I mean, I almost feel like some of the AI generated music that I've been hearing sounds better than the actual artist's original music. I know that sounds terrible, but like some of the Drake songs, the newer Drake songs sound, better than his recent stuff. So I think a lot of that's going to depend on how prevalent it becomes, because the more people that use it, I think the more diluted it'll get. But I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence, Phil.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Michael, again, you're at ground zero in Hollywood. Are we going to see an explosion of new content that's so original and so different? Or are we going to see an explosion of content that all has a similar feel to it?
As my friend Katie Hinson mentioned, is that it's an aesthetic right now. So what you're generating with a lot of the tools right now, whether they be audio or visual or still, there's an aesthetic to it. You mentioned earlier that a lot of the images that were trained, I think you said on Midjourney, had a lot of shallow depth of field, right? It was quote unquote cinematic. And I think like anything, we're going to get tired of that aesthetic and we'll move on to something else. So I think right now for Grimes, it's a good land grab. Right. I think there's that line. What is it? The pioneers get the arrows, the settlers get the land. Right. And I think the first people to do this are the ones who are going to make a name for themselves, and they will be a footnote in the road that is to being successful in whatever industry they're in. But I think at some point, folks are going to get tired of this is a remix of sorts, and they'll crave to go back to the more unique concepts out there as opposed to just retreads.
It's sort of like, hey, everybody who's DVDs and CDs are the greatest. And now everybody's gone back to vinyl, or, going back to film as opposed to digital. We're going to start to see things, completely written without AI as a tagline to bring people into whatever, quote unquote, that art happens to be.
I don't think it swings like that, Philip, though. I think, number one, we've seen the same generalized movie remade over and over again, whether it's Seven Samurai, Magnificent Seven, Casablanca. These films get sometimes remade shot for shot with just Pamela Anderson instead of Humphrey Bogart, which is Barbed Wire, and it's a terrible film. Sometimes it's the zeitgeist of when something is made. Sometimes it is the live human nuance. What I find fascinating is that there's a generation of people listening to music who goes, oh no, even I like that muddy MP3 sound. CDs are too sharp. Vinyl just, it's not, I'm looking for the thing that sounds like the thing that gives me comfort from when I was in my teens to early 20s. So I think that the artistic appeal will always swing, but good storytelling at the end of the day is what's most important. And if all the stories end the same way, we're going to start looking for new endings.
Yeah. So we're coming up on the top of the hour. So I'm going to ask each of our guests one final question. And that is, we'll start with Morgan, ladies first. What is your prediction over the next 2 years for AI? What do you see as the big thing, or where you think things are going to go?
That's a good question. I'll start with the bad and end with the good. I think from, the thing that we're all anxiously awaiting, which is regulation on kind of the limits of AI. And I think, to be fair, that is probably a necessary first step, just to make sure that, whatever it is we're building is for good. I think everybody is going into this with the best intentions. But, there have been a couple of really public announcements put out by, former heads of large organizations, warning about the dangers of what could happen if it's in the hands of the wrong people, which I completely respect. So I think we are going to see some regulation on that a little bit. We're never going to fully cut out the creators, because for everybody concerned about the writer strike, I fully support, what they're standing for. But I mean, let's be real. Have you ever read, a screenplay that an AI wrote? They're terrible. All of them. I mean, not a single one of them is good. So I think, the upside at what we're looking at over the next couple years is being able to put out content faster. I think when I survey a lot of the users that I'm working with, it doesn't matter whether you're making videos for social media or whether you're a massive, M&E brand that's producing content for a streaming service. Everybody's content deliverables have gone up exponentially over the last 3 to 4 years, sometimes even 200, 400%. So there's no shortage in the demand here. And I think what the AI tools can help us deliver on is being able to put out more content to reach wider audiences. But I'm hopeful that, we might be able to kind of shift the paradigm of who actually gets to make content, because I think Hollywood is a little bit of a small pond as far as who has opportunity, and I'm really hopeful that we're going to get more female voices, more international voices that really have big platforms to tell their stories. Because to Jeff's point, I mean, there's 6 story types that exist out there. If you read any screenwriting book, I want new stories, man. I'm done with the remakes. We can make new franchises, and I think AI is going to help us get there faster.
Yeah, Michael, what your predictions over the next 24 months? End of the world.
Well, I think the regulation is going to happen a hell of a lot sooner when this next election cycle and around the world we start getting into voice cloning, deepfakes, face swaps, and it once that hits on your doorstep, once that becomes part of the political zeitgeist, to quote Jeff, once that happens, you're going to see some massive regulation. And what I hope that race, that arms race almost, I think is then going to dovetail into local models versus cloud models. I think needing to pay a service, and I mean, no disrespect to Adobe at all, I pay for their service each month, it's great, but we are getting to the point where we're paying for 1,000 different cloud services. And if I have to pay for a cloud service for their model, but it doesn't have what this model does, we're back to the streaming wars. So I'm looking very much forward to the point where we can take these large models, create smaller models that run locally, and then spawn other models, agents as they call them, so we can create on-prem, create in our own tools without having to rely on someone else with a bigger computer serving out those models to everyone else.
Yeah. And Jess, so what are your predictions for the next 18 to 24 months? What do you see coming down the pipe?
I'm going to take some of my tones here from Morgan. So please let me do that. I'm going to go dark before I go light. I'm going to think that we're going to see loads of people entering the market with tools way too fast and in way destructive ways, without caring about copyright, without caring about how the models got the material and how things are created. In fact, in what Michael was saying about getting to market quickly, we're going to see this, and we're going to see also AI tools do terrible things. I'm frightened for the day that the first AI malware comes out that doesn't need a human controller to start breaking down somebody's operating system or cloud service or the like. I think the last mile is always the most difficult. I think we're going to see crazy acceleration month to month. It feels like I've aged years since NAB, and that was just a month ago. The stuff that's really, I'm hoping that I don't think is going to happen, but I'm hoping that all these groups that are releasing stuff to a market have to release how their models were trained, what open source tools they were using, and register. What I would really like to see them do is have to register the code of their open source, even if it's closed to say Congress, the idea that somebody could look at the code and look for malicious intent or the like. What I really want at the end of the day is these tools to add some extra joy, whether it's being a creator or spending time with my kids who have just come home and we're lucky we haven't been visited by them. But that's what my hope for these tools are in that respect, Philip.
Yep. And I'll agree with you on that, Jeff. I think that we're still, as Michael had pointed, in the gold rush of this, and we're going to see, I'd say, over the next 18 months, lots of hype on the capabilities of the tool. I know I saw an article the other day with the head of OpenAI saying, everybody keeps saying, wait till GPT-5 comes out, wait till GPT-5 comes out. And he said they haven't even started training GPT-5. They're actually starting to put the brakes on a little bit. I think that as an industry, I love the tools. To me, they're fantastic tools, and the sharpening tools and the conforming tools and those things that just save me time and save other creatives time, I think are really going to be the big winners. The generative stuff is fantastic and it will be additive. I don't necessarily know. There's within the next 18 to 24 months, we're going to see the first film that's completely AI generated. I don't know how great it'll be. The Blair Witch Project was a fantastic film, and it was the only one ever sort of done like that had any success. There was another first-person POV type movie that was done because they could do it, and it wasn't so much of a success. So I think that hopefully society as a whole will give guidance to those creating the tools and to us using the tools as to what they want to see. And to your point, to tell a good story. So with that, I want to thank all of my guests, Morgan and Michael and Jeff and everybody who came on today to watch, and join us next month on the 28th of June. We'll be bringing the next episode of TKT Visionaries, which we will be focusing on the SMPTE 2110 and where are we with IP video. So until then, thank you very much, and we'll see you next month.